Let's go back to, because I'm going to mess around with this, but let's go back to what's going on today and this month, obviously, with the 2022 midterm elections in the state of Florida. We've seen about 2 million-ish people already vote by mail. Out of the 14.5 million people in the state of Florida that can cast ballots. The last election, as far as a midterm, 8.3 million people voted. That was the Gillum DeSantis race back in 2018. You know, we talked on Twitter. You were talking about New Jersey, rather, that they were about 30% early voting so far. That was about 2 weeks left, with 2 weeks left, I should say. Can you talk about what your opinion is as far as Florida already having 2 million people as far as early voters, and how is that going to affect the election? Is it going to be more than 2 million, or is there going to, who benefits from this early voting? What do you think, Ion?
Well, it's hard to say at this point. Right now, the data that I indicate shows that it's about 42% Democrat of the voters that have already voted, about a little over 39% are Republican, and about 19% are no party affiliation.
Yeah.
And that's the breakdown right there. And it really indicates that it's close. There's a slight Democratic lead, but we know, for example, that in Florida, Republicans vote more on election day. But again, everything's been thrown up in the air since the 2018 election, Rob, because when COVID hit the state of Florida, that's when the Democratic Party decided to vote by mail and switched their operation. What had been a heavy early voting operation switched to a voting by mail operation. And I don't know what in 2022, whether that pattern is going to reestablish itself or not. We're going to have to basically watch that and see. But right now, there is a slight lead in Democratic turnout in terms of the vote by mail ballots. Early voting started in 30 some counties on Monday, on the 24th, in the state of Florida, and will run through November 6th, which is the Sunday before the Tuesday election. So in-person voting and early voting will continue all the way through November 6th. And I'd like to talk about voter registration has ceased, because in order to register to vote, if you've not registered to vote in Florida, it's too late to do that. However, one of the things that people may not realize is if you registered in another jurisdiction and you're still on the books in that Florida jurisdiction, like, for example, you registered in Miami, you came up here to go to school at Florida State University, you never changed your address, can you vote? And the answer is yes. It's yes. Because all you have to do is go to an early voting site, and because we have this statewide voter registration database, they can go and actually bring you up while you're right there at the early voting site and see whether or not you voted in Miami-Dade. And if you haven't and haven't requested a vote by mail ballot, what the Leon County election officials can do is grab that voter and transfer you to your residence in Leon County and give you a regular ballot, and you vote. And most people are not aware. So if you are validly registered anywhere in the state of Florida and you've moved to another place, all you have to do is an address change and you can vote, and you can do it at the same time at
Hold on,
any
though.
early voting station.
This is just in Leon County, or is this any county in the 67?
Any county of the 67.
Oh,
Any
wow.
county of, and that's why having a statewide voter registration system that's integrated is important. That's why it was in this National Voter Registration Act in 1993, because the old rules were that you had to re-register to vote in the new county. No more. After 2006, it's an address change, and you can do it the same time
Wow.
you vote. And so, again, people that have not been current on keeping your residence current, all you have to do is do an address change at an early voting site, any in the state of Florida. I used Leon County simply because that's where I live. And I have my Leon County vote by mail ballot, which is a full paper ballot right here. Every race on the ballot. Actually, I won't show it too closely because I've already voted. It's
Yeah.
a fully and I'm going to bring it to an early voting site, and I'm going to turn it in and vote in the precinct. For the only reason is that my son will be operating an early voting site. He is now following in my footsteps and working in elections. So I'm going to go to an early voting site to allow my son to check me in and allow me to vote.
That's awesome.
So that's another thing. If you request a vote by mail ballot, you don't have to use it under Florida law. In some states, Ron, they actually require you to use it. They won't allow you to bring it in to vote in person if you've requested a vote by mail ballot. It's ridiculous rules. All we have to do is take the vote by mail ballot, take it to an early voting station, turn it in. They'll cancel that ballot and give me one right there, and I can vote it in person. So again, that flexibility is present at early voting stations. Early voting stations, in my opinion, are the most flexible way to vote in the state of Florida.
I agree, and that's great that your son is standing in his father's footsteps as working elections. Let's talk about this. Keep going into 2022 because we have some elections questions as far as just around the country. But I want to kick this around. Obviously, we know what happened with Hurricane Ian. It really devastated some parts of the west coast of Florida, especially Lee County, that Fort Myers, that Sanibel Island area really got hit hard. Can we talk about what's going on as far as what you know? I know you know a lot of politicos, a lot of people in the elections area, so you may know better than us, of course, of what's going on in Lee County and how the elections are going to take place for people that maybe lost their house. Maybe they were supposed to get a mail ballot, but obviously their whole area is destroyed, or the voting place where they were supposed to go to is destroyed. This is a very conservative area for the most part. So obviously, I'm sure Governor DeSantis is really looking into what's going to go on with these voters on the west coast of Florida, but specifically in Lee County.
Well, you've raised an excellent point, and I'll tell you, it's a kind of a disquieting issue in that every voting precinct in Lee County has been destroyed and will be non-operational. Every one. Tommy Doyle, who's the supervisor of election there, is going to open 12 early voting sites. He can staff 12 what are called early voting sites, which act as like super voting sites. So you don't have to be in any particular precinct. Anybody can go to any of these 12 locations. The governor changed through his emergency executive order some of the laws so they could do this. Those 12 early sites will go all the way through and be the voting sites also for Tuesday, November the 8th. And that's a change in Florida law. Normally, there can't be any early voting on Monday before the election and on election day. Those sites have to be closed and you have to go to voting precincts. But since there are no voting precincts that can be used in Lee County, they're only going to be using these 12 sites. So Supervisor Doyle there is attempting to use these 12 sites and voting by mail. The voting by mail is problematic because mailboxes, homes are destroyed. The level of destruction is incredible. It's as bad as what occurred in 2018 with Michael up here in the Panhandle, but fortunately, it hits much smaller communities here. But the devastation was immense up here in 2018, and now for the first time, it's hit an urban area. Now, so it's going to be a real voters that are going to try to vote by mail are going to have to be pushed to the limit, i.e., the post office may not be able to deliver your ballots if there are no homes and mailboxes. Individuals might have to contact the postal services to see, do you have my ballot? In some cases, you can actually go to the post office and get the ballot from them. But in any case, it's going to be problematic voting by mail. Contact the supervisor of elections office directly. And there's also a vote tracking system. If you do vote by mail, you can actually go to the website of Lee County and find out if they've received it and whether it's been counted or not. And that's critical because you've got to confirm in these areas that your vote has been received and it's been counted. Again, the systems call it ballot tracks we use in Florida.
Yeah.
Every county has it. It should be a requirement nationwide. Everyone should be able to track their own vote by mail ballot to know if it's been received. But basically, so that's what's going on in Lee County. However, this storm, which came across the state, entering in the southwest and leaving on the southeast, caused record flooding. Thousands of people were lost in terms of their homes being destroyed. Those counties don't have the flexibility.
Right.
And
well, I mean, I'm talking.
And one of the things that critics have pointed out is Lee County, where they have this flexibility, is 2-to-1 Republican. Whereas some of these counties that are flooded and people can't live in their residence, they're Democratic. And guess what? They don't have that flexibility. So the rules are different depending upon what part of the state and where the hurricane hit you.
Well, Osceola County got hit pretty hard. Kissimmee, I mean, I'm not that far. Even though I'm in Polk County, I'm not that far away from that area. I'm in that Lake, Polk, Osceola, and Orange County, the Four Corners area, they call it, of Central Florida. And we got hit, not as bad, obviously, as Lee County, but we still got hit pretty hard. It was a category 1-ish hurricane. And, Sanford, the city of Orlando, got flooded really bad. It's not talked about as much on the news because obviously there wasn't as extreme devastation like there was in Lee County, but Orange and Osceola got hit hard. Daytona Beach over that area, Brevard, they got hit pretty hard too. So like you said, these areas got hit, but they're not getting any help. So in a way, I do believe what you're saying is correct. And I think the governor is putting his finger on the scale a little bit for Lee County, more so than people in Orange, Osceola, Brevard, all these other counties that may be a little bit more Democratic than Lee.
Well, certainly, I believe that those areas that were hit by these record level flooding in Sanford, in Orange County, and Osceola, they should have been given some more flexibility to let their election official have the same kind of discretion to determine what was in the best interest of making sure their voters can vote. And governor pretty much locked that down and limited it to Lee County at this point. But again, the turnouts are heavy in the rest of the state. I don't know what the turnouts have been in Lee County. It's difficult, and I really don't want to really intrude much into what they're doing there because I have worked through a hurricane. We were hit by Irma in 2016. It shut down all of the power in the entire Leon County area. In fact, all of the public officials had gathered in the Leon County Supervisor of Elections office because we had prepared for a hurricane and we had 4 generators. So we were like the only county building that actually had power, air conditioning, television, because we had prepared for the hurricane to make sure that if it hit, we could still run our election. But elections hurricanes are tremendously destructive entities. If you haven't lived through one, you don't want to live through another one. I've lived through 2 at this point, and that's enough for me at this point.